My talk will be dealing with color Doppler, radiant flow, and slow flow high definition. The idea was to put all these together because I'm not switching from one technique to the other, but I'm using all three together, so in a way that I can see the details I need. So the aim of my examination is always to get the most precise information possible. So this is why I combine all these technology. If you look at history, we started with what we can today call classic color. This is why I will not say color, I will say the colored Doppler. And then in the late 90s, we had the power Doppler, but I still prefer to use, let's say, intensity Doppler, because power Doppler is for the ladies, it sounds like putting a lot of energy in the fetus. And then we had the bidirectional power Doppler with the high definition flow, and we're using this in combination with 3D to have a glass body mode. And since a few years, we have also the radiant flow, as well as, since last year, the SURF technology allowing us to measure and to demonstrate velocities in the very, very low range. So I will show you some regions we are using. So this is how we are scanning. If you see the Arctic arc, you can get either the color, the power, or the high definition flow, and you may switch to radiant flow, and then this is here the three-dimensional appearance you will see. So at the beginning, I thought it's only a post-processing technology. But in the meantime, you know, while you are scanning, then it is already during the calculation of the picture that it is. At the beginning, I was using this very often when I had colleagues doing ultrasound, like radiologists and cardiologists, until one day, one patient, she was a cardiologist, said, wow, brilliant. I said, thank you, thank you. You mean my skill? I said, no, sorry. I mean, the colors are so brilliant. I told her, I'm sorry, but this is the wrong answer. So this is, at the beginning, as I told you, I assumed it's only a kind of coloration with the highlight of the middle of the high velocity. But actually, if you look at here carefully, you can see very clearly the borders. So theoretically, when you see such a picture here on the lower left, you are not knowing whether there is a connection between the two vessels along this. But once you see here, because of the border, you see that this is the vessel going down. So it's not only, let's say, a gimmick of color, but it's also a sensitive calculation of color and borders as well. So radiant flow, it looks like a 3D. It has an algorithm for more sensitive color borders. On the other hand, the slow flow provides very low velocities and allows the demonstration of not small, but very small vessels. Vessels, I don't know even the anatomy that they are existing, so I guess sometimes until the capillaries. It can be used in early gestation, and I think safe, because with the slow flow, you have even less energy than with HT flow. So if you start with HT flow and you switch to slow flow, you see that the MI and the TI are even going down. So this is something which can have a potential of use in future in the early gestation and probably also in early embryo. So if you look at the region of interest we are using, we'll have from the brain to the cord to the placenta and the abdominal wall and the intra-abdominal structures until the heart. So I will not cover all. I will focus on mainly three. First of all, the liver vasculature. So liver vasculature in general, we check either in a cross-section, visualizing the umbilical vein and the portal venous system, and we can get also a longitudinal view demonstrating the umbilical vein with ductus venosus. And this is here how the picture appeared. So 2-3 years ago when we were using with the electronic probe here, the radiant flow. Now, if you switch to, this is a case here now with an abnormal umbilical vein dilation or ectasia. If you look at this picture here, switching to the slow flow, very slow velocities, you see vessels, you don't know that they even exist. And the first time I saw this, guess what I thought? It reminded me something. It was beginning of January. I said, it looks like the Christmas tree I have at home. So it looks like a Christmas tree. You've seen the lights on the tree, so because we see the ramification until the border of the liver. Interestingly, you can go down in pregnancy. You can scan here 17 weeks vaginally, where if you need to look at the portal venous system, you have very well differentiation. And you go even earlier, and this is the portal venous system at 13 weeks. I never was able until now to see the portal venous system so nicely and so well in early gestation. And in cases you have an abnormal ductus venosus, this is the time where you can start. We used to say in the past, we need to wait until 17 weeks of gestation to get an answer. And recently I've seen a case, the patient having, as you see, severe hydrops, and this was a typical fistula between the hepatic artery and the umbilical vein, showing that there is a scarce portal venous system, and you see some echogenicity, so also, in addition, an abnormal vasculature in the liver and probably hypoplasia of the portal venous system. We move now to the second part, which is the brain vasculature. Here you can use different views, either the mid-sagittal view or an axial view. You can show the arteries as well as the veins. And let's see here what you see in general with HD flow in comparison to slow flow. With slow flow, you see also the Rosenthal veins around the cerebral peduncles. You see the arteries going into the cerebellum. So you have by far more sensitive values and demonstration in comparison to the classical radiant flow. The question is, do we need this all the time? Probably not, but we don't have yet applications, but if we want to seek for, we can find. And these are two cases with abnormal brains. I'll show you only the images. You see here it was an abnormal polymicrogyria with an abnormal vessel here, and this is a fetus with a suprasellar arachnoid cyst, where you see that the circulus ovilis is exactly around this cyst, which is a typical location of the suprasellar cyst. Then we can have a look to the pericallosal artery, either in mid-gestation or even at 32 weeks, and you see here how differentiate are the vessels until the peripheral cortex from abdominal view. Vaginal view can even be better, and this is an example of a vein of Galen aneurysm with a huge dilation of these vessels. In this case, I will not use the slow flow. I prefer to use the radiant flow, where you can show these vessels as well. And we know that many of us are using the pericallosal artery in order to demonstrate cases within agenesis or dysgenesis of corpus callosum. And you see here on color Doppler and on slow flow especially, the different aspects of the pattern of these vessels when there is an abnormality of corpus callosum. So you will not have a typical view. You will have, depending on the development of the sulci and gyri, different views and different images. So this is here one case at 22 weeks, where you see how the vessels are abnormal, and this is called the anterior cerebral artery because you don't have a pericallosal artery since there is no callosum. And this is a fetus at 35 weeks. This is how it appears in late gestation, and you see the dilated third ventricle with an abnormal shape. And now that you see this, you know that all these arteries, they go along the whole fissure and gyri here, as you can see. This is the vaginal view, and of course you will perform a transvaginal ultrasound when you have suspicious brain anomaly, and you see in this fetus there was an abnormal posterior fossa, there was an agenesis corpus callosum, there was also an interhemispheric cyst, and also abnormal gyration. So you see here the vessels, how they look absolutely odd and different than the normal cases. And sometimes you need to look at more details in this view. I use this view especially to focus also not only on the thalamostriate arteries, but also within this rhombus here you will find the optic chiasm. This is a good location to look for, and you can see if the vessels here are normal or abnormal, if they are symmetrical or not. Let's go now earlier, so pericallosal artery at 15 and 16 weeks, and if you have the chance to scan vaginally at 16 weeks, this is a picture you can detect, and you can demonstrate also the pericallosal artery, and you can see the first parts of the corpus callosum. So this is ideal in patients having a previous history. Of course, I will scan them at 12 weeks, but we don't have yet, let's say, conclusive data showing that this is the confirmation that there is a normal corpus callosum, until you wait until 18 weeks, and this is not enough because you don't know if this corpus callosum is going to grow properly. So keep in mind there will be not soon, any solution of corpus callosum early gestation, because the recurrence can be dysgenesis and short corpus callosum next time, and the first time wasn't completely absent. So this is why we are not yet there, but on the way. So, and then see this fetus at 16 weeks with a suspicious face, and the brain looked like a Warburg syndrome, and look at these abnormal vessels. And please note the horizontal course of this vessel, showing that even when there is horizontal course with slow flow, you are able to demonstrate and see these things. And this is here for me typical in a complete agenesis of corpus callosum, because there is no the typical shape, the C shape we see also at 16 weeks, as I showed you before. Now, the anterior cerebral artery, I'm not using it often because I have no indications yet, but occasionally when there is a previous history, like in this family with a previous agenesis corpus callosum, I will try to demonstrate the anterior cerebral artery and the first part of the pericallosal artery, and you see here until the intercerebral veins and the straight sinus. And one of the interesting indications you can use is when you see holoprosencephaly. In all holoprosencephalies, except the middle interhemispheric variant, you will have no corpus callosum, and you see here typically one artery, the anterior cerebral artery, just under the skull. And this was described by Jean-Pierre Bernard as the snake under the skull sign. And this can be used if you have suspicious of holoprosencephaly confirmation, or in cases where you have a previous history, so you can demonstrate that this vessel is not present this way. So this is a typical one. Ideally, but you don't have an indication, you can also have a look of the circulus of Willis. And this is here 13 weeks transvaginally, and you really realize that we have two anterior cerebral arteries, even if we don't see them properly on color dot, but you see here how they come together in the region of the anterior communicating artery. So today, this morning, Ritsuko, who's sitting here in the audience, showed a case of the hyaloid artery in early gestation, and she was showing that it is abnormal in holoprosencephaly. And personally, when I have a fetus having severe abnormalities going into termination, I'm trying always to find new fields, and this is here the hyaloid artery seen at 13 weeks. And she was telling us that this is a normal condition, that in cases with holoprosencephaly, this vessel looks abnormal. And Ritsuko, I have to tell you that you are right, because this is exactly what I observed. And you see, this is a fetus with holoprosencephaly, and you see that the vessel accidentally did the same at the same time in two different cities, in Osaka and Berlin. So you see here, the vessels, what you were telling us this morning, are exactly the same. You could demonstrate. So you see here the close artery toward let's see, the nose because of the hypothyroidism, and abnormal shape because probably this lens will not work. So I move now to the last part of my talk, is the heart and great vessels. Actually, we may say we may not use the slow flow at the level of the heart, but playing a little bit with the presets, which is a little bit tricky actually, you can get nice images, especially the horizontal shape of the vessels here, and you don't care for aliasing or similar images. So in general, I scan the normal heart with the radiant flow showing the 4-chamber view and moving to the 5-chamber view to the 3-vessel trachea view, and then I switch to lower velocities to demonstrate the pulmonary veins and the subclavian artery. And these are the images of MUST I will try to get always in my examination in the views plus the aortic arc. So now let's see some views. This is here the classical radiant flow, and this is with the tiny slow velocities with the slow flow. And you can today, with the sensitivity of the machine, get very good images from 10 weeks onwards. And this is here the image at 12 weeks until 32 weeks. Very sharp, very clear, and nice septum with clear demonstration of the color along the septum and the wall of the ventricles. And some anomalies, a small muscular VST or a single ventricle with a double inlet into a single ventricle, and also tiny vessels, not only the major, but also the aberrant subclavian artery and the descending left superior vena cava coming from the upper, from the head, from the neck toward the heart. And you see here, this is a fetus with the tetralogy of Fallot, where you see clearly the overriding of the aorta in the tetralogy by using the radiant flow. And you see the borders very clearly, so there is no doubt that there is no overriding, so no sign of possible artifacts, which can be also found in color Doppler on normal fetuses when you have this view. And this is here, ideally, two ways. I love to switch the image to have a 2D on one side and the color Doppler on the other. And here I'm using once the HD flow, and on the right side, the slow flow. But on the slow flow, you see that the colors, the filling is in blue. Some will prefer to use the monochrome mode, but I'm not using it. If you have slow flow, I would recommend you to do following. This is now my preferred way of work, which needs along 1 minute. If the fetus is in this position, start first with normal HD flow, and at the end, when you are in the 3-vessel view, switch to slow flow. So look how it looks like. You start with the filling of the chambers, you move slightly to the upper thorax. Once you demonstrate the 3-vessel view, you go to slow flow, and then you see the normal subclavian artery. So it takes you less than 1 minute. If the feet is in good position, you have good preset. One button, switching from one to the other one. Because what I'm doing now, I want to look at tiny vessels, and this is how I do it. The same, I can do it also for the pulmonary veins. But you see here, this is a fetus scanned transvaginally to demonstrate the aberrant subclavian artery, and you see how clearly you can see it. And if you have experience with color or HD flow, this is a view you will really love to have it. But as you have seen here, I'll show it to you again, that the color for the heart is not very well demonstrable. So, and by playing with the preset, I moved here from 0.4 to a higher mode. And this is also a possible preset with 0.65 kilohertz, where by reducing the gain and augmenting the line density, you are able to use it, this technique, this slow flow, as a classical HD flow, so where you can demonstrate the crossing of the vessels and the filling of the chamber. So if you play a little bit with it, you can use it also for the heart and not only for very, very tiny vessels. Now, since we are able to see very narrow vessels, let us see some 2-3 fields before I finish. One is, for example, the azygous vein arc. You can see it on the axial view. And you see here, this is the azygos coming into or connecting to the superior vena cava. If you look at the longitudinal view, you see the azygous vein entering the superior vena cava. So theoretically, if we have sensitive color, we should see this in early gestation as well. And this is here 13 weeks where I'm able to demonstrate the azygous arc in a cross-section, and here the azygous arc in a sagittal view. So moving from slightly to the right, you see the azygous arc. So then you can imagine how sensitive this color is if it's able to show you vessel you will never be able to see with the other technology. Another view is the thigh box, the mammarian arteries described by Dario Palladini. You see here the thymus and surrounded by the mammarian arteries with color Doppler and radiant flow, and this is at 13 weeks, and you see the thymus clearly within or between these two mammarian arteries as a thigh box at 13 weeks. Last but not least are the pulmonary veins. So at 21 weeks, it's of course easier, but at 13 weeks, it's also possible to look at these vasculature. So I have, in general, for first trimester, I have one mainly for the heart and one for the tiny vessels like the pulmonary veins, the subclavian, and the thigh box where needed. So in other words, I come to the end. I showed you a few examples of the sagittal view and axial view of the brain, showed you several anomalies, worked with you on the intra-abdominal system with different views. Remember the Christmas tree sign. And last but not least, I showed you also the different aspects of the heart. And I thank you for your attention.